Pirates controlled the seas with terror and steel, but there was one crew member who controlled the pirates themselves. This person could destroy an entire ship without firing a single shot, yet they're completely invisible in every story you've heard. One mistake from them meant death for everyone aboard, and it happened more often than you'd ever imagine. That mysterious crew member was the designated cook on a pirate ship. And they weren't just some random crew member who happened to know how to boil water. This person held one of the most crucial positions on the entire vessel, often meaning the difference between a successful voyage and a floating graveyard. Most pirate ships had one main cook who handled all meal preparation for the crew. Finding a skilled cook was like discovering buried treasure, and smart captains knew to protect these valuable crew members at all costs. A good cook could keep a crew together better than any captain's threats or promises of gold. These cooks typically came from fascinating backgrounds. Many were former sailors who had sustained injuries during previous battles or raids. Perhaps they'd lost a leg to enemy cannon fire or simply grown too old to scramble up the rigging during violent storms. Rather than abandoning these experienced men, clever pirate crews recognized their continued value in the kitchen. Then there were the captured cooks, taken from merchant vessels during successful raids. When pirates attacked trading ships, they often spared the cooks specifically because they understood how essential proper food preparation was for crew survival. But the cook's importance went far beyond simple meal preparation. They controlled crew morale in ways that even the most charismatic captain couldn't match. A crew forced to eat spoiled meat and moldy bread would turn mutinous faster than sharks circling a sinking ship. The cook's knowledge extended to preventing deadly diseases like scurvy, avoiding dangerous food poisoning, and stretching meager rations during extended voyages. They understood which foods would last longest, how to identify spoilage before it killed anyone, and how to make terrible ingredients taste somewhat edible. What's particularly interesting about the pirate hierarchy is how cooks were compensated for their essential services. While the fiercest fighters received the largest shares of plundered treasure, cooks often earned more than the lowest-ranking crew members. Some pirate codes specifically outlined the cook's portion of any loot. When everyone was hungry and miserable, the cook was either the hero who saved the day or the target of every complaint on the ship. Cooks also had to navigate treacherous crew politics with considerable skill. They couldn't show obvious favoritism when distributing meals, but they also needed to keep the captain and officers satisfied. But managing a successful kitchen operation on a wooden ship presented unique challenges that would terrify any modern chef. Cooking on a wooden ship required managing open flames while surrounded by highly flammable materials, essentially like preparing dinner inside a giant tinderbox that could explode at any moment. The primary cooking apparatus was called a camboose or caboose, which was a specially designed firebox or stove built for shipboard use. The camboose sat securely on a thick bed of sand or bricks, creating a barrier that prevented heat from reaching the wooden deck below. Most cooking operations took place on the main deck during favorable weather conditions. The cook would carefully light the fire and constantly monitor wind direction to ensure flames wouldn't spread toward the sails or rigging. However, bad weather created serious problems for meal preparation. When storms struck or rough seas made the ship pitch violently, lighting any kind of fire became impossibly dangerous. During these periods, pirates had to survive on cold, stale food while feeling seasick, which probably explained their permanently foul moods. The actual cooking equipment was built for durability rather than convenience. Heavy iron pots hung over the flames using sturdy hooks or iron bars designed to withstand the ship's constant movement. Fire management demanded constant attention and strict scheduling. Cooking fires were only permitted during specific hours, particularly when seas remained calm and wind conditions were favorable. The cook had to coordinate meal preparation around weather patterns and sailing schedules. Most cooking techniques involved boiling rather than frying or baking methods. Boiling was significantly safer because it contained heat within the pot instead of spreading it across open surfaces. Additionally, boiling helped eliminate harmful bacteria in questionable meat. Salt water was frequently used for boiling certain foods, helping to conserve precious freshwater supplies for drinking. This practice wasn't ideal for flavor, but fresh water was far too valuable to waste on cooking. The entire cooking process was like trying to prepare a family dinner while the kitchen floor constantly tilted and rocked beneath your feet. Every aspect of food preparation had to account for the ship's unpredictable movement, rapidly changing weather conditions, and the ever-present risk of catastrophic fire. But even the most skilled cook was limited by the ingredients available for creating these dangerous culinary adventures. The typical pirate food supply looked like a survival kit designed by someone who had never heard of nutrition or flavor, consisting mainly of items that could survive months at sea without turning into deadly poison. Salted pork and beef formed the foundation of every pirate's diet. These preserved meats were packed in wooden barrels with enough salt to mummify a whale, allowing them to remain edible for extended periods. The meat emerged tougher than boot leather and saltier than ocean water. Hardtack served as the primary bread substitute, though calling it bread was being extremely generous. This concrete-like substance was created from flour and water, then baked until it achieved the hardness of stone. Hardtack was so durable that it could probably survive a cannonball hit better than most of the ship's actual structure. Nevertheless, hardtack could last for years without spoiling, making it perfect for unpredictable voyage lengths. The major disadvantage was that eating it required soaking in water, soup, or rum just to make it soft enough to chew. Dried legumes like peas, beans, and lentils provided vital nutrients that prevented certain diseases. These humble foods were easy to store, lasted indefinitely when kept dry, and could be boiled into filling stews that stretched other ingredients. Cheese wheels were brought aboard whole and often became fascinating science experiments during long voyages. The cheese would develop impressive collections of colorful mold, but pirates typically just scraped off the worst growths and consumed the rest. The cheese aged about as gracefully as the pirates themselves, which is to say, not very well at all. Pickled foods like cabbage and onions were crucial for maintaining health during extended sea voyages. The pickling process preserved vegetables for months while providing essential nutrients in a sour, tangy package. Rum was far more than just entertainment on pirate ships. This abundant alcohol didn't spoil like water, could be mixed with water to create grog, and served as a preservative for some foods. Rum solved more problems on a pirate ship than any other single item, from preserving food to preserving sanity. Fresh food represented the ultimate luxury when pirates could obtain it. Capturing merchant ships or stopping at friendly ports provided opportunities to acquire fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits that were consumed immediately. Spices represented the pinnacle of culinary luxury aboard pirate ships. Pirates treated good spices like gold dust because they were the only thing standing between edible food and another night of chewing salted leather. Having all these ingredients available was only the beginning of the challenge, though. The real test was transforming them into something the crew could actually eat. Mealtime aboard a pirate ship bore no resemblance to civilized dining, instead functioning more like a carefully organized feeding frenzy where everyone tried to get their share before it disappeared. Pirates typically consumed 2 meals each day, with the first served around midday and the second in the late afternoon. This schedule worked around essential sailing duties and weather conditions that might prevent safe cooking. Food distribution happened through shared containers because individual place settings were luxuries that pirate ships simply couldn't accommodate. The crew would gather around these communal vessels and dig in using whatever eating implements they possessed. The meals themselves were usually basic, repetitive, and often served cold. When hot food was available, it typically took the form of stew made from whatever ingredients happened to be accessible. Stew was the most practical and popular dish because it could feed many people from a single large pot. The cook would combine salted meat, beans, and crumbled hardtack with water, then boil everything until it reached an edible consistency. This stew had all the flavor and appeal of dishwater, except dishwater was probably cleaner. Preparing hardtack for consumption required special techniques since it was harder than most rocks. Pirates had to soak these concrete-like crackers in water, soup, or rum for extended periods just to make them soft enough to chew. Water quality presented constant challenges for the crew. Fresh water stored in wooden barrels quickly developed algae, slime, and unpleasant tastes. Pirates learned to prefer grog, which was rum mixed with water, because the alcohol helped kill harmful bacteria. Eating conditions were far from sanitary by any modern standards. Rats scurried around constantly, getting into food supplies and leaving droppings everywhere. The ship's rats probably ate better than the crew since they got first pick of the grain supplies. The cook wielded significant power through controlling food distribution. They decided who received the choicest pieces of meat, who got extra rations when available, and who had to settle for the leftover scraps. The crew either ate whatever was served or faced starvation, and complaining about the menu wasn't exactly an option when your chef was also armed with knives. While the regular crew was struggling with basic survival rations, however, the captain was often enjoying a completely different level of cuisine. The difference between a pirate captain's meals and the crew's food was like comparing a royal feast to prison rations, with the captain enjoying privileges that reminded everyone exactly who was in charge. Captains claimed first rights to all food on the ship. When meals were prepared, the captain was served before anyone else could even see what was available, allowing them to select the least spoiled meat, freshest bread, and largest portions. The captain's food was about as close to edible as pirate cuisine could get, which still wasn't saying much. Many captains maintained private food stores hidden in their personal quarters. These secret supplies included fine wines, quality cheeses, dried fruits, and preserved delicacies that were completely off limits to the regular crew. When pirates successfully raided merchant vessels, the captain exercised first choice over any captured food supplies. If the conquered ship carried exotic spices, aged wines, or fresh fruits, the captain would claim the finest items for personal consumption. Fresh fruit held particular value since it was extraordinarily rare during ocean voyages. When captains managed to acquire fresh oranges, apples, or other fruits, they would hoard these treasures in their private quarters. This fresh fruit helped prevent scurvy and provided essential vitamins. The captain's meals were frequently prepared separately from the crew's communal food. Instead of eating from the same stew pot as everyone else, captains might have specially prepared dishes created just for them. Captains could also use superior food as a reward system for crew members who had demonstrated exceptional loyalty or performance. Getting invited to share the captain's dinner was like winning the lottery, except the prize was food that wouldn't actively try to poison you. The quality gap between captain's food and crew's rations was often dramatic. While the crew struggled with wormy hardtack and rancid meat, the captain might enjoy relatively fresh bread, quality wine, and properly preserved meats. A captain who ate too well while the crew starved might find their next meal served with a side of mutiny. Yet, regardless of who was eating what quality of food, everyone aboard the ship faced the same fundamental challenge of preventing their supplies from rotting in the harsh ocean environment. Food preservation on pirate ships required constant vigilance against spoilage, turning every cook into a part-time chemist fighting an endless battle against bacteria, moisture, and time itself. Salting was the most widespread and reliable preservation method available to pirates. Meat and fish were completely buried in wooden barrels filled with massive amounts of salt, which drew out moisture and created an environment where harmful bacteria couldn't survive. Drying provided another essential preservation technique that pirates used extensively. Grains, fruits, and certain meats were spread out in the sun until every trace of moisture evaporated. The end result looked about as appetizing as old shoe leather and probably had similar nutritional value. But drying presented its own challenges in the humid ocean environment. Keeping dried foods dry required constant attention and careful storage in sealed containers. Pickling used vinegar or salt brine to preserve vegetables and other foods that couldn't be dried or salted effectively. The acidic environment created by vinegar prevented dangerous bacteria from growing while keeping food edible for extended periods. Smoking was employed when time and favorable conditions allowed for this more complex preservation method. Some meats were smoked before voyages began, which added distinctive flavors while helping prevent spoilage. Alcohol proved surprisingly effective for food preservation beyond its obvious recreational uses. Pirates sometimes soaked foods in rum or wine to prevent spoilage while adding flavor. This was probably the only time pirates complained about wasting good rum, though they usually found creative ways to taste test the preservation process. Airtight wooden barrels served as the primary storage containers for most food supplies aboard pirate ships. These barrels were carefully sealed with wax or tar to prevent air and moisture from penetrating the contents. Food rotation became crucial for preventing unnecessary spoilage. Pirates had to use older supplies first before they deteriorated beyond safe consumption, requiring careful organization and regular inspection of all stored foods. Even with all these preservation methods, some spoilage was completely unavoidable during extended voyages. Pirates became expert judges of exactly how rotten food could get before it crossed the line from unpleasant to deadly. Despite the best preservation efforts, though, pirates still faced serious health risks from their limited and often contaminated food supply. The pirate diet was basically a comprehensive guide to everything that could go wrong with food, creating health problems that made every meal a potential death sentence disguised as dinner. Scurvy was the most terrifying food-related disease that plagued pirate ships. This devastating condition resulted from severe vitamin C deficiency, which was nearly impossible to avoid when eating only preserved foods. Pirates suffering from scurvy would lose their teeth, develop painful bleeding sores, and eventually die if they couldn't obtain fresh produce. Food poisoning presented a constant and deadly threat because pirates had no refrigeration methods to keep food safely cool. Pirates spent so much time leaning over the side of the ship from food poisoning that they probably knew the ocean fish by name. Dysentery and chronic diarrhea were frequent problems caused by the unsanitary conditions that existed on every pirate ship. Contaminated water, unwashed hands, and poor sanitation meant that stomach diseases spread through crews like wildfire. Rat infestations posed serious threats to food supplies that went beyond simple consumption. Rats would break into barrels of grain, flour, and hardtack, eating the contents while leaving contaminated droppings throughout the food. Weevils and maggots were regular inhabitants of pirate food supplies. These insects would lay eggs in grain products, and their larvae would hatch and multiply inside barrels of flour and hardtack. Pirates had to choose between eating bug-infested food or facing starvation. Most pirates consumed infested food unless it smelled overwhelmingly rotten. They couldn't afford to be selective about food quality when supplies were severely limited and no alternatives existed. Food shortages sometimes forced crews to implement strict rationing systems that barely provided enough nutrition for survival. Hungry pirates were more dangerous than any storm, since storms eventually passed, but starvation just made everyone increasingly desperate. The psychological effects of constantly eating terrible food were just as dangerous as the physical health problems. Endless meals of spoiled, tasteless food severely damaged crew morale and contributed to violence and internal conflicts. Food-related disputes could escalate into serious violence among crew members. Pirates might fight over the last decent piece of meat or argue about fair distribution of limited supplies. The most extreme food crises sometimes led to mutiny or a complete desertion. No amount of promised treasure was worth slowly dying from food poisoning while floating in the middle of the ocean. These constant health risks and food-related problems served as harsh reminders that pirate life was far from the romantic adventure that popular stories often portrayed. Life aboard a pirate ship revolved around food in ways that determined survival, morale, and success. Every aspect of eating required skill, luck, and determination.